because it works. The principles have been honed for decades. As a strategy, direct attacks on infrastructure is highly effective. So please, stop saying that this doesn't work. Now, beyond the general principles, you can learn about target selection. I gotta say, this hits my happy spot. Criticality, how important is it? Vulnerability, how tough is it? Accessibility, can you get to it? Recuperability, what would it take to repair it? Suddenly, some things start to make some sense. For instance, why groups like the ELF have had no real decisive success? That's the targets. All the targets that we've chosen have a low criticality and high recuperability. That's very typical for resistance groups that lack training. Okay? It's the targets. It's not the commitment, it's not the courage, it's the targets. They're chosen for their accessibility. Okay? But those targets are not in any way critical, and they are very easy to repair. This is your basic Starbucks Windows strategy. I say this as someone who has smashed her share of windows. I personally destroyed thousands of dollars of property. It's a lot of fun. It's ultimately pointless if this is what you're doing. Why? Low criticality, high recuperability. We've got to stop thinking like vandals and start thinking like field generals. All right, we've been carrying out operations that are emotionally appealing in the hopes that this would somehow to remove the ability of the rich to steal from the poor and the powerful to destroy the planet. And goal 2, to defend and rebuild those autonomous communities and ultimately to assist in the recovery of the land. So these two goals are interdependent, and the movements involved are going to have to work in tandem in some way. And that's why I want the permaculture wing to get on board. I mean, they really need to be doing, part 2. That's really their job. It's always the task of the cultures of resistance. And it's going to take a lot of different organizations, mostly above ground, mostly working nonviolently. Part 1 could be achieved using nonviolent tactics. Well, we don't have the numbers, and I think everyone in this room knows that. So it's going to take an underground network that has both the commitment and the training to pull this off. In case you can't find a way to hope, there is actually some hope. And I think that the above ground could take their hope from the French labor strike that happened last November. Totally above ground. The protesters used trucks, they used human chains and a few burning tires, and they blockaded the fuel depots and managed to close all 12 of France's oil refineries. The major oil terminal was offline for 3 weeks, and that stranded 30 oil tankers in the Mediterranean because there was nowhere for them to offload. The major oil terminal, when the government tried to open the emergency reserves, the protesters blockaded 20 more terminals. So they escalated, right, when the government tried to stop them. In a few weeks, the entire economy was slowing to a halt for lack of fuel. Now, the French strikers did what every military and every insurgency does. They interrupted key nodes of infrastructure on that way to cascading systems failure, right? They did it using nonviolence. Well, if we had the bodies, it could be done. The question is, do we? For the underground, your hope is mend. This is the movement for the emancipation of the Niger Delta. Now, the oil industry has earned literally hundreds of billions of dollars off of Nigeria's oil. The Niger Delta is the world's largest wetland. Only now, it could more reasonably be called a sludge land. The people are knee-deep in oil industry waste. They used to be self-sufficient. They are now starving and sick. All the fish are dead. Okay, there's nothing left to eat. The original resistance was Mossad, and that was led by poet activist Ken Saro-Wiwa. Theirs was a nonviolent struggle against Shell Dutch Oil, trying to get the oil industry out. In 1995, Saro-Wiwa and 8 other leaders of the movement were hanged by the military government. Completely illegitimate. Despite international outcry, nobody was able to save them, so they were all hanged. And by all accounts, Ken Saro-Wiwa went last, which means they made him watch all 8 of his best friends get murdered first. So, the level of sadism you're always dealing with these people. MEND is the second generation. They do direct attacks against workers, bridges, office sites, terminals, oil rigs, pipelines, and support vessels. They have managed to disable 1/3 of Nigeria's oil. In one single attack, they destroyed 10% of the capacity, the production capacity. There was a series of attacks last December, just before Christmas. They shut down 80% of the oil in Nigeria, 80%. Their main tactic is the use of speedboats and surprise attacks against simultaneous targets toward that goal of cascading systems failure. These people are quite serious. Now, the French did it non-violently because they had the numbers. men use as poverty destruction because they don't. What they do have is university educations. They clearly study other militant movements. They also have a broad base of support amongst the local people, which helps because people give them safety, they don't turn them over to the authorities. But their training in combat is so good that they have come up against the private militaries of the oil companies. But did you know oil companies have their own militaries? Yeah. I don't know where people in North America think oil comes from. I'm sure you have this discussion all the time with people in your lives, but yeah, uh-oh, what happened? We lost. Cameron, can you make this go back? I need to go back. Yes, thank you. So oil doesn't just fall from the sky, and honestly, you can't plant it with your nasturtiums. It has to come from somewhere. It has to be ripped off the land, which means that people have to be ripped from their land, which means those people have to be ripped in half. And that is called a private military. So, MENT has come up against the private militaries. They've also come up against Nigeria's elite fighting units, and they've won. So that's how good these people are. This is a true resistance. They're not just a bunch of armed thugs, and they number just a few hundred. So understand, a few hundred people, well-armed and coordinated, have destroyed 1/3 of Nigeria's oil capacity. They've actually said to the oil industry, leave our land while you can or die in it. Now I can guarantee that everyone in this room has more resources than all of men had put together when they started. Resistance is not just theoretically possible, it's happening now. The only real question is, will we join them? What if we said, leave our land while you can or die in it? What if we meant it? Okay, the facts as they stand. Our planet is dying. Actually, she's being drawn and quartered. We're on the verge of complete biotic collapse. Did you know that there are parts of China now where there are no longer flowering plants? It's because all the pollinators are dead. No flowering plants. That is 500 million years of evolution gone. Complete biotic collapse. We are out of soil, we are out of species, and we are out of time. And the climate holocaust has already begun. And we have got to abandon this concept of lifestyle politics and start thinking like a serious resistance movement, because this is a war. Now I know it feels like daily life. It's been going on for 10,000 years. Right? The lights are on, the cupboards are full, but it's a war. And if anyone is left alive 100 years from now, they are going to wonder, what the fuck was wrong with us? That we didn't fight like hell when our planet was going down. Now you love something, or you wouldn't be here today. Love is a verb. We've got to let that love call us to action. Thank you. Technology failed, yes. So I don't think we've got time for questions. Why not? Because I think we're supposed to be out of here. Okay, we'll take 10 minutes of questions then. That works. Want to talk? Yeah, okay, go ahead.
So you both kind of characterized the leading by example technique or method as trying to change power structures, but other people might see it as trying to influence other citizens and voters to take action in the democratic process. If that's not the way to go, and the goal is to break down the power structure, what assures you that your ideology will prevail? And would you advocate the same tactics be used by people who have different or competing ideologies?
I think that your tactics have to be matched to your situation. And I think that for most struggles, that nonviolence is vastly preferable and even more effective. The reason that I'm suggesting the strategy that we are in the Deep Green Resistance book is because we don't have the numbers. We simply don't, and we're not going to. People in this country are way too comfortable. We're the 5% and get over goodies. So you're not going to find a whole bunch of people like in Nigeria who know that this is a war. I mean, it doesn't feel like a war for us. So that's why I think we're sort of stuck looking at these other kinds of tactics, and I think that's where a lot lot of the environmental movement is stuck. They just can't get over that hump to think about a strategy that actually matches the scale of the problem, and that's what I'm after. I don't think there's anything wrong with personal example. I think most of us are influenced by the people around us. And so if the people in your life are more radical and they're asking for more out of you, that's not a bad thing. But that's not the main strategy that will work. It's not going to work sort of by diffusion, by one, talking to people. It's going to work because we have a goal of creating a movement. Okay? And that movement then has those goals. So I would say that the goal is to get more people into that movement and then create the goals, create the strategy that will win, look at the tactics that might do it. And so that's the difference, is whether you see just this sort of diffuse, sort of individual by individual thing, you know, moral exhortation, provoking something, as opposed to, we're going to build this movement. We're going to teach people how to think politically. We're going to show them what the problem is. We're going to try to figure out all together what tactics we're willing to use, and then we're going to go for it. So that's what I would say the difference is. You know anything there? So we need a woman now. Oh, they're in the green.
So I kind of enjoyed your presentation, but I kept getting caught up in what I heard as inaccuracies in a lot of statements you made. And I think it was because it seemed like you were making a lot of absolute statements. And then I also feel like, as an overarching presentation, what I'm really missing here, as somebody who's really familiar with like some basic political strategy from tactics, you know, objectives, tactics, goals, is that I never heard the goal. So I don't feel like it's a good strategy, for instance, to instigate cascading systems failure unless you like know what that's going to result in. I mean, if you're talking about overthrowing the current political paradigm, for what political paradigm are you trying to overthrow it? And I assume, you know, you both being virtually feminists, that you've read Judith Butler and Nietzsche and Martha Nussbaum, and you know that a solution isn't about replicating the same tactics of the power structure you're trying to overthrow. And I think a lot of the issue with doing something like terrorism on an infrastructure level is that that's exactly what you're doing. You're embodying many of the same tactics, and I'm not clear where you're getting.
Yeah, I have heard Judith Butler, and let me say first of all that I mainly disagree with her main position, which I have read that. Second, also, you're using the word terrorism to describe this, and again, I find this problematic because the most terroristic thing that we're seeing right now is the destruction of the land. And to say that we're embodying that same ethic that we're seeing from those in power, like, to me, I find a problem with that. And most resistance movements know that there's a very strong difference between defending the land, defending your communities, and if you're using violence to defend those communities, versus the violence being used to destroy communities and to exploit communities.
So I need to know, like, so if you're talking about cascading infrastructure failure, though, I mean, you're talking about also destroying communities. That's not going to result in, like, oh, everybody's better off after. I mean, you're talking about some people are going to suffer during that process, and I don't hear here, like, what the long-term vision is. Like, what do you see, you know, 50 years in the future after you successfully, you know, say,
see life.
But I mean,
yeah.
Like, that's not a vision. Like, life, what do you mean? Like, this is life too.
I see a place to call home because I don't see that right now. Right, I'm 22 years old. I don't see a place for my children in the future, and that's very scary. And I don't see a place for their children. All right, this is the only strategy that I've seen that leaves a place for us to call home. And if you have another strategy, I would like to see it. I really would.
But what's the? I just don't get it. So, like, let's say we have a resistance movement. Like, what's the strategy is, like, take over the political structure. Are we back in a democracy? Are we like?
I'm actually not talking about taking over the political structure, because I think that's the work for the above ground. So, I mean, we have here, you know, defend and rebuild just sustainable autonomous human communities. We had that list of, you know, what's the goal for the above ground, and that includes direct democracy. And that really can only be done on a local level. So all of those principles have to be embodied in this, and that's why, like Derek Jensen always says, we need it all. And I strongly believe in all of those things, but it's not enough. So I'm not about taking down the political power structure. I don't care. I'm about taking down industrial civilization, because that's what's killing the planet. That other stuff is important work, and somebody's going to have to do it, but that's not my main goal. My main goal is to stop this now. And, you know, you reference people dying. People are dying now, and they're dying so that we can extract all this crap, okay, and get it all for ourselves. We live behind a military barricade, so it's not your neighbors that are dying. It's poor brown people in other parts of the world. They will breathe a sigh of relief the moment this is over.